All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting here on September 30th, 2025 for the Lake County Board of Supervisors in collaboration with the City of Lakeport and the City of Clearlake. First off, as we call this meeting to order, we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mayor Costa, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you for that. And so as we get to our next item on the agenda, I'd like to open it up for everyone to introduce themselves. It's been a while since we've had a collaborative meeting like this, so between our municipalities and the county. And so I will start off with Mayor Costa, and we'll go around the room that way.
Brad Rasmussen, District Board of Supervisors.
You're next.
Jessica Peiska, District 5 Supervisor.
Kenny Parlett, Lakeport City Council.
Tara Downey, City of Clearlake.
I didn't know.
Mary Wilson, City of Clearlake.
Stacy Matina, City of Lakeport.
Ellen Owen, District 1 Supervisor.
Jessica Hooten, City of Clearlake.
Bruno Sabatier, District 2 Supervisor.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Brandon Disney, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Lakeport.
Russ Kramer, Mayor, City of Clearlake.
Eddie Crandall, Chair, Board of Supervisors, Lake County. And so with that, I will give this off to our esteemed Matthew Rothstein to start off.
Good evening, honorable supervisors, council members, and to all gathered here and participating this evening online. I'm Matthew Rothstein, Chief Deputy County Administrative Officer. This evening's workshop with Sonoma Clean Power offers an opportunity for members of the Board of Supervisors and City Councils to ask your questions and get information needed to decide whether joining Sonoma Clean Power is right for Lake County. You will be aware Sonoma Clean Power has previously presented at more than 10 public meetings around Lake County over the course of 2025. But this evening represents the first time the board and councils have come together for a single discussion. On behalf of the city managers and county administration, thank you all for making a point to be here. We truly appreciate it and look forward to your constructive dialogue. And now, I turn this presentation over to Jeff Cyphers, Chief Executive Officer for Sonoma Clean Power.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the board and councils for making time for this. I'm grateful for that. I'm joined here by Mendocino Supervisor John Haschek and our Staff Managing Director of Customer Service, Erica Torgerson, and Ryan Tracy, who heads up our Planning and Analytics Department, also an expert in geothermal, and also joined by our council. Oh, sorry, Neil Reardon was raising first. He heads up our Regulatory Affairs group, and Josh Nelson, our counsel for Sonoma Clean Power. So we're ready with a lot of our long-timers to answer hopefully every question that you have tonight, and that's really why we're here. So we really want to have this presentation to cover the basics and go a little deeper to answer some of the community questions we've heard, and then make sure all of your specific questions get answered. So this will be the third time that Lake County has asked SCP to consider extending service. First time was in 2015. And we weren't ready then. We were 1 year into service, and we had never contemplated expanding beyond Sonoma County. And so at that time, you want to switch mics? Let's try that. Is this better? Checking? Yes. Okay. In 2015, we simply weren't ready. And so we begged Lake County to wait or go their own way and let us get our act together. The second time was in 2019, and when we ran that feasibility analysis, we found that PG&E's fees on new customers were going to be new customers of SCP were going to be so high that we mutually agreed it wasn't a good time to join a CCA. probably anywhere in PG&E territory. And now we're here in 2025. And so when we got the request at the beginning of this year, we went back and did a second feasibility study in a lot of detail. And thanks to Ryan for heading that up. And we found the conditions were much more favorable. And in fact, we haven't seen conditions this favorable in our history. And so at this point, I would expect that joining in this round and starting service in 2027, which is the soonest we can do it by regulatory process, we'd likely see rates in Lake County that would be slightly lower effectively than rates in Sonoma and Mendocino counties, simply because PG&E's fee would be lower. That's our current expectation. I also want to thank Supervisor Owen for the suggestion to travel around to all the community advisory committees. I learned a lot about your community here, and I got a lot of really positive feedback about SCP. Is that noise coming from this microphone? I don't think it's this mic. Okay. So I got a lot of good feedback about the interest in joining SCP, and a lot of good questions about the details of geothermal. And that really is one of the subjects we want to get into tonight. Let's see if I point it away from the speaker. Does that help? Get closer. Eat the mic. Okay. So with that, I do have a presentation here, and several folks up here will speak to it. And I think the first question before you is, why even consider joining? And this slide speaks about some of the value of local control, but I want to give you one really concrete example that isn't written on this slide. When you join a CCA, you capture a stream of revenues from generating power, meaning they flow through your agency as part of SCP. And what that means is you can use those revenues to issue municipal bonds, and then you can build things. So we've already issued $775 million in municipal bonds. We used all of that to prepay supply contracts to lower the price of rates for customers. So we've already set up a contract to cut the costs for customers by $47 million over the next 8 years. We can only do that because we're a CCA. And so joining a CCA gives you local control over finances in a way that is unusual. It's not something you get through a lot of other channels. Sorry. What is a CCA? We'll get to that, but the sneak preview is it's a community choice aggregation, and I'll explain what that is in an upcoming slide. Sorry I jumped the gun on using that acronym. So we build large things. We contract to build large wind power projects, large solar. We're obviously working toward geothermal. And we also build really small scale things. So we have 100 megawatt systems, but we also, this is a 1 megawatt solar array in Petaluma, California, that we rented land from a dairy that had fallen on hard times. And so they leased their land to us and we used it for solar. Another reason to consider joining is that we think of SCP as an extra layer of protection for our residents and for our businesses. And we don't just produce clean power. We also deliver customer service and advocacy. And Neil will speak to the advocacy and Erica will speak to the customer service. We've saved small businesses tens of thousands of dollars just by helping them get on the right rate. Sometimes businesses are paying the wrong rate and they're getting charged an enormous amount extra. We also lobby for lower costs and for renewable energy. And when PG&E or the Public Utilities Commission tries to tip the scales against ratepayers, we are often the watchdog that fights back. And over the last 11 years, we've provided customers with small direct savings on their bill for 9 of those years, typically trimming bills around 2 to 5%, so it's not an enormous amount. In our worst year, we were 5% more expensive than PG&E. In our best year, this past year, we were 7% cheaper on total bills. And so that gives you a range about the direct savings. But what I want to brag about more, and I'm going to ask Neil to speak to this, is our indirect savings to customers from our advocacy often produces even bigger benefits and finances. So you'll hear about some of those details later. We work in our community. So the Lime Foundation, I was just chatting with one of the supervisors about Letitia Hankey, a force of nature, who's founded the Lime Foundation and the Next Gen Trades Academy. They help work with youth to build real applicable job skills in our community. And I understand they're expanding to Lake County soon. They were a recipient of a grant to help them purchase an electric vehicle. And we've now given out more than 20 of those grants to nonprofits who are doing important community work. And they range from $15,000 to $22,500 for supporting the purchase of an electric vehicle. We also work in schools. So we work a lot with trades and high schools and in lower schools, elementary as well. This is a class that's building an electric car from a kit. And at the end of the semester, they have a street legal vehicle. And this is about life skills. They're learning how to use plans and so forth. And we fund those kinds of projects. So here we go. What's a CCA? Sorry, I didn't have this earlier. So again, community choice aggregation. It's a mouthful, but CCAs are really how local governments are taking back some control over energy, since the state has essentially made it difficult to impossible to form a new full municipal power provider. Over in Ukiah, they have a full municipal power provider, and that means they own not just the generation, but they own the power lines as well. It's very hard to create a new one of those in California now. The investor-owned utilities like PG&E have basically protected their turf. And so what we have as an option is to take the generation side of the business. And that's a much more straightforward process. So PG&E, well, let's see, let me back up here. So since Lake County first started exploring community choice in 2015, the world has changed pretty dramatically. CCAs are not an experiment anymore. They're mainstream. And in fact, on this slide, it points out that over 1/3 of all of California homes and businesses is served by a CCA today. So we expanded very rapidly over the last decade. And we have 25 of our agencies around California. We're just one of them. And what I want to emphasize is that we do not replace PG&E. So SCP is a lot like a municipal power utility without the poles or the wires. We generate power, but we use PG&E's wires to deliver the energy to our customers. PG&E still owns and maintains the poles, the wires, and the billing system. And SCP just makes sure that the power sources putting energy into those wires are cleaner and more affordable. And so we don't take on PG&E's wildfire risk or their infrastructure responsibilities. That stays with them. So all of that liability is still PG&E's. So in this latest round of responding to Lake County's request, we again completed a feasibility study and found that SCP customers would have somewhat lower PG&E fee, as I mentioned earlier, than current customers. And those are very favorable conditions, much better than we found in 2019 during our Lake County study back then. And it gives us a lot of confidence in actually recommending to you to join SCP today. And that's the first time I've said that. I've been here numerous times, and I've been really leaving the question of whether we're recommending this really up to your staff. I'm here today to actually recommend it. I don't think you'll see probably a better time to do it than now. The regulatory climate is good, and we're finding much more favorable conditions than we've seen in the past. So SCP's board made a decision to offer Lake County 2 seats at the table, 1 for the county and 1 shared seat for the cities. And that will give Lake County a proportional voice. So you'll have 15% of our customers, and you'll have 15% of the board. And that's the same arrangement that Mendocino agreed to in 2017. So this next slide, with votes to join in October, SCP would begin a regulatory process that would enable us to begin service in May of 2027. And I'll show that timeline in a little more detail next in a couple slides. So we've been operating SCP for more than a decade, serving nearly 90% of all electric customers across Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And we've cut emissions, we've held costs down, We've built strong financial reserves, and all without any access to tax dollars. That's important. We don't have access to general funds, and we don't have access to taxing. Our 11-member board today would grow to 13 members if Lake County joins. And one thing that's really important that isn't spelled out on the slide is we're organized as a joint powers authority, and that is critically important. It's the JPA, the Joint Powers Authority, that signs long-term power supply contracts, and the member cities and counties have no financial liability for those contracts or for any future financial liabilities of our operations. That firewall is critical because we have today well over $1 billion of power supply contracts, and that liability could never transfer to any city or county in any responsible way. So the only obligation of members is to appoint representatives to the SCP board and to participate in governance. So with this offer of service, our board is seeking to confirm that Lakeport, Clearlake, and the county all have good alignment on joining SCP, and that the county is aligned on the concept of developing new geothermal resources in Sonoma, Mendocino, and Lake counties. We've heard community input that our plans for constructing new geothermal power are not sufficiently detailed yet, and Ryan will speak on that in a bit. But as I mentioned earlier, our board is offering the 2 seats starting January of 2026, even though service wouldn't begin until May of 2027. And it's up to you whether to appoint board members this coming January or to wait. But for my part, I would argue that getting immediate representation on our regional board is exactly how Lake County can steer our geothermal plans in ways that work for you. As far as process goes, the October votes are how this all starts. And if you approve it now, then we're on track to deliver service in 2027. If you choose to wait, at the bottom of the slide, there's a note. I would need to return to my board and ask them to issue a new offer. And in any event, all the timelines would be pushed back at least 1 year. So because of the CPUC, we have this long waiting period that they require for noticing of PG&E before we can serve. So I wanted to turn it over to Erica Torgerson and to talk about customer experience.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us this evening. My name is Erica Torgerson. I am the Managing Director of Customer Service for Sonoma Clean Power, and I'm going to walk you through what customers can expect, customer choice, and customer benefits. So assuming you guys vote to join us, and we accept, of course, we will start our outreach in 2026. We will start by introducing ourselves to the community and listening at local events, attending meetings, tabling, and building awareness for residents and businesses of Lake County. We want to start answering questions now so people feel comfortable when they join. Between May and October of 2026, we'll focus on key opportunities to connect and lay the groundwork for SCP's launch. It'll start to get more serious in 2027. We will increase our visibility in Lake County, including more presentations, tabling at events, and focused outreach to low-income, English as a second language, solar, and tribal communities. All residents and businesses will automatically be enrolled in May of 2027 unless they proactively opt out of service. And we let all our customers or potential customers know via mailing and emailing them prior to the switch to service. Yep. So one of the great things about Sonoma Clean Power is that we're providing choice for the first time. Prior to Sonoma Clean Power, we were all customers of PG&E. That was the one option, and that was it. Coming in now, your residents and businesses will have 3 options. 1, they can stay with PG&E and continue receiving power just as they always have today. They can stay with Sonoma Clean Power and you'll be defaulted into our basic service, which we call Clean Start. That service is 51% renewable and 40% carbon free. This is much cleaner than the mixes of power that have traditionally been on the grid. Also, if you do want to do a little something extra, you can sign up for our 100% renewable option. This is a little bit more money, but it is 100% locally generated power. So I'm going to talk a little about the customer benefits of being a Sonoma Clean Power customer. So first and foremost, improved customer service. So if you're happy talking to PG&E, you can still do that. You can still sign up for their programs, but we are here to offer additional services, and chances are we will answer the phone within 45 seconds or less. It's a little bit different than the last time I called PG&E. So also, we were not formed to make a profit. We have no shareholders. We don't get bonuses. We don't have pensions. We operate like a for-profit company in regards that we compete with PG&E for generation services, but we are a public entity still, and because we don't do anything with tax dollars, we stay here. We get a regular 401k just like everybody else. Our primary job is to serve our customers. As I said, we are not making a profit here. We have no shareholders. We help customers better understand their bill, offer tips to reduce energy use and save money, and find the rate that works best for you. So a couple of examples up here that we have recently been able to help customers in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. These are small businesses, and just by being on a different rate, these are annual savings that these customers are receiving. In addition, we have one more that we just found, and that customer will save $43,000 just from the last 3 months. And that is simply because they were on the wrong rate with PG&E. So the great thing about being in a community choice program is that we get to actually focus on our customers and our community here. We do not have to worry about a program that works for the Central Valley or the far up the coast. We work just for the people that we serve here. And we have different needs than other parts of the state, and that's how we work to make sure the programs we offer and the rates we can give are as good as they can be as we all sit here and work and live in SCP territory. If you are a customer that is currently receiving a low-income discount from PG&E on medical baseline, or even a discount as an employee of PG&E, those discounts continue. There is no change. People do not need to re-sign up for that. Also, we have a solar program for our net energy metering customers that is very similar to PG&E. And if you do switch to Sonoma Clean Power, that does not change your NEM status. And I know that's a big thing going on right now. Finally, we have a call center that is 100% local. All our employees live in around Santa Rosa, and they will answer that phone generally within 45 seconds, if not sooner. In addition, they are all customers of employees, and they are all bilingual. Sorry, that was the next slide, Jeff. I did, so I'm going to pass it off to Ryan.
Thanks, Erica. So I'm Ryan Tracy, Director of Planning Analytics. Thanks for having me. We're really excited to be here. So in my main responsibility at Sonoma Clean Power is really thinking about the future energy system, thinking about our portfolio of resources and what we're going to need. And I want to start off by stating that it's hard to overstate the importance of the geysers today. It's already in Lake and Sonoma counties. It's critical for Northern California grid reliability. It offsets the emissions of over 400,000 cars. It's a huge taxpayer, an important employer. It's really a critical asset. And looking forward, we're seeing the importance of geothermal only grow. As the state continues to decarbonize, we're running into a situation where we're increasing the amount of renewable generation, but we're still relying on natural gas plants for reliability. We've retired very little natural gas capacity. That has poor outcomes for ratepayers, having to pay for the natural gas power plant to be on standby while also procuring power from these new resources. Geothermal solves that because it's something that can be relied on throughout the year, and it can be an energy source. And meanwhile, when we're looking at like wintertime and thinking about energy needs in wintertime, it really is just a critical piece to the puzzle when thinking about moving forward. The issue looking forward, from our perspective, we've been thinking about this for a couple of years, is there's just not enough geothermal development in the pipeline. And instead of waiting for other states or other regions to develop geothermal, What we're really looking at is there something we can do locally to build more affordable projects that are more accessible to our ratepayers, projects that have co-benefits, provide tax revenues, provide other types of benefits to the local communities. And that's really a key driver for our interest in promoting geothermal development. Move the next slide. While we've been looking at this, we haven't been alone. I think we started this project back in October 2021, but meanwhile the state has come to the same realization, and they've started looking at the scale of the geothermal buildup. And for context, right now, California has 2,000 megawatts or so of existing geothermal capacity. It is the largest, as far as geothermal capacity is concerned, it is the largest producer in the United States. But California is looking at a need for at least ordering 2 gigawatts more of geothermal in the near term. And actually just today, they actually released a new portfolio, and they're realizing with tariffs, with a lot of the different types of issues, with moratoriums on wind, they're seeing needs, they're testing needs of upwards of 9 gigawatts of new geothermal. So we see geothermal is going to need to play a role. And the question is, do we rely on other regions to do that and kind of take a passive stance and have them name their price, or do we look for local options to move forward projects that work for us? I think one thing that we've been closely monitoring too is there's been a renaissance in technologies in the geothermal industry too. That's been exciting because it's adapted technologies from oil and gas to be able to drill and be able to produce geothermal resources from areas that weren't previously viable. And that's really important, not just from growing capacity, but increasing the flexibility to site geothermal where it makes more sense. In the past, for conventional technologies, there were very limited areas where geothermal made sense, and that's where you had to site the plant. That's where you had to drill the well. These new technologies allow you to be more flexible in thinking about where projects work from a perspective from the surface or from the perspective of the community. You can go ahead to the next slide. So Sonoma Clean Power's initiative to drive local geothermal development is organized in something we call the Geothermal Opportunity Zone, or GeoZone for short. The GeoZone specifically started with a pact between Sonoma Clean Power as the CCA and our 2-member counties, Sonoma County and Mendocino County. Both Sonoma County and Mendocino County passed resolutions at the formation of the GeoZone expressing a shared interest in exploring development of geothermal resources in our territory. Importantly, though, these resolutions retained their existing regulatory authority, and really they were just meant as a signal to say, hey, this is something we're interested in looking at, opportunities to attract this type of development because we see it as important. This is the same type of resolution that we're asking Lake County to consider as part of joining Sonoma Clean Power. The GeoZone, we're currently targeting 600 megawatts of total development. So for context, the existing geysers is 700 to 800 megawatts. So this would be a sizable increase in the geysers output. And that 600 megawatts is driven by a couple factors. I think from a technical perspective, it's something that's feasible. From an infrastructure perspective, it's something that is also conceivable given the amount of transmission that was built originally for the geysers. And it's also enough to meet our long-term needs, inclusive of Sonoma, Mendocino, and Lake counties. An important part of the GeoZone is we need industry. This is, developing geothermal involves a lot of risk, it involves new technologies, it involves a lot of capital. It's not something a government agency can directly do yet. So the way that the GeoZone makes progress is through cooperation agreements with industry. And these cooperation agreements are agreements that we set up with industry partners that set guidelines for the types of projects that are compatible with our view of GeoZone. Projects that engage in community and stakeholder engagement, projects that are respective of local values, and also, I think importantly too, we've arranged these cooperation agreements where we get a financial advantage to our customers. So if they're successful, then we actually get secured first right of refusal for any power that's off that they generate. The one thing I think Jeff alluded to at the beginning was that this opportunity for Lake County and the cities to consider joining the board in January. I think this is especially important because we're we're currently expecting to look for more geozone partners. And I think that process is really going to ramp up in early 2026. And we would love Lake County to be part of those conversations. Last time we chose industry partners for the geozone, we actually, as the last round of selecting partners, we had our industry partners show up to a public meeting, present their plans, answer all the tough questions from the community, and our board had that as input before deciding to move forward with an industry partner. So I think that's a really important component of the geozone. Before I hand this off to Neil, I think there's two other things I want to share. One is that I think we see geozone as a chance for us to lead locally and really build our credibility. And that's really important when we're looking at the state, looking at they need 10 gigawatts of geothermal power. If they need that, they're going to figure out how to get that built, and they're going to circumvent they're going to circumvent local priorities if necessary. By figuring out solutions ourselves and proving that we can solve these problems on our own, we build the credibility to be able to drive this and be in the driver's seat. So I think that's really important. And I think one last thing before I turn it over is we have heard public concern of Lake County's participation in the geozone. I think real quickly I'll share from my perspective, if Lake County's view is that there should be a moratorium on all geothermal development. If the desire is we have enough geothermal, we don't want any more. Then I agree with the perspective that Sonoma Clean Power and the geozone is not a good fit. I think Sonoma Clean Power has identified geothermal as a long-term need. They've identified that this initiative is really important in moving that forward, and I think that would demonstrate kind of a strong misalignment. However, I think if Lake County is interested in geothermal growth, but has a lot of concerns, wants to do it the right way, I think that's exactly what the geozone is. It's a chance to be able to get involved early, to be able to help shape the types of partners, the types of projects that we put together. And as I mentioned, I think we're really in early stages. I think we get a lot of questions about where things are going to happen, what they're going to look like. And the real answer is we're still formulating the plan. And I think the earlier we plug you in, the more influence you'll be able to have. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Neil.
All right, Neil Reardon. Hi, good evening. My back is happier when I stand, so I'll continue to do that. First of all, appreciate all the elected officials and community members taking the time to come learn a little bit more about this option. My name is Neil Reardon. I'm our Director of Regulatory Affairs. But tonight I want to tell you what that means and what my job is. And so I'd like to make 3 points on the following slide. Fundamentally, what I do is make sure that the voices of the people in Sonoma and Mendocino are heard when, not if, but when statewide decisions are made that impact them. And we hear from customers repeatedly, both in person and on the phone and through surveys, the number one concern they have when they look at their bill is, why is it so high? So as a result, a lot of our focus of my team is on advocacy to lower rates wherever possible. Now, a little known fact is that the for-profit utility model, it's effectively a business upside down. They spend their way into profitability. So the more that they can spend and get approved by the state, the more that they can earn a profit on. So whatever amount they're allowed to spend, say for a new power plant, they get to add 12% as their profit. Now, I work with plenty of good people at PG&E, but part of their job is to make sure that 12% is of the biggest number possible. So simply put, when they show up and bring that to a judge and ask for permission to raise all of our rates, my job is to show up and ask for them to show their math. A second fundamental piece of my team's work is really just to go to bat for customers' rights. So several of you may remember a couple years back, there was a proposal from the California Public Utilities Commission to devalue, to reduce the credit that customers who installed solar on their roof got. Now, the problem was they were going to do this immediately. And we heard from customers that they were counting on those credits when they installed and financed a solar system over 20 years. And we didn't think it was fair for the state to come in and change the deal midstream. In that case, the CPUC heard us. They changed the proposal and agreed to honor the deal that they'd promised to customers. And the third piece I want to share is on our legislative advocacy. We are a growing force in Sacramento. Last year, we proposed and saw the passage of our first bill AB 1359, which brings local control to the permitting of geothermal exploration projects, instead of just leaving that with statewide decision makers in Sacramento. This year, we have 2 more bills that are now going to the governor's desk, aimed at further reducing the red tape and excessive time it takes to develop new projects in the state. So that's what I wanted to share. You've listened to me boast about my team's achievements. To be very clear, though, I cannot guarantee a win, and that's something I always share with our board. What I can guarantee is that when the decisions are made, the decision makers will know the opinion and the impacts on the people of Sonoma and Mendocino counties. So with that, I'll turn it over to Supervisor Haschek.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm John Haschak. I'm the 3rd District Supervisor in Mendocino County. I represent Willits, Laytonville, Covelo, the northeast area of Mendocino County, and I'm currently the chair of the board. And I'm also the representative on Sonoma Clean Power for our board. And so, like Jeff said earlier, we have from Mendocino County 2 representatives on the board of Sonoma Clean Power. We have 1 chosen by the board and 1 chosen by the cities that are represented, and outside of Ukiah, because Ukiah has its own municipal power situation. So the reason I got on the board was Supervisor Dan Jurdy was on the board before me, and he kept telling me over the years that we worked together, he said, if you get on any board, get on Sonoma Clean Power, because they are the most well-run board that he's been on. And he'd been on a supervisor for 12 years. When he retired, I said, I'm going to get on that board, and being the chair, I appointed myself. And it's been a really good fit, because I see professionalism on that board. I see, the information is always there, and they're listening to the viewpoints of the board members. And so I think it's, I totally agree with what Supervisor Jurdy said, was that it's very well run. The outreach, there's questions about, okay, well, it's a Sonoma County thing. Well, it's actually Sonoma Mendocino County, and I represent that area in the northeast section of Mendocino County. And, I'll see Sonoma Clean Power at events in Covelo, at tribal events all throughout the county, up in Laytonville. They're doing their outreach, and they're letting people know what the benefits of Sonoma Clean Power is, for them. And so that's really, and it's really heartwarming to see that they care about the people in my district. And I just think that the people appreciate that too, because you're not going to get that really from PG&E. The one thing that I think that the people like most in my district is that it's clean energy, and it's also lower cost. And so when you talk about those 2 issues with people, they say, why wouldn't we do it? It's a great deal. And I think that the reputation of Sonoma Clean Power is very positive, because it's cleaner than PG&E and lower cost. And one thing that, we've been talking about some of the projects that are going on, and certainly this geo zone is, for Mendocino County, we're looking at it for, economic development, and also, cleaner energy. But the 2 go hand in hand, and when they do, it's a beautiful thing. But we also have another project going on in the Ukiah area, and before Sonoma Clean Power would go forward with, pursuing that project, I get a call from Jeff, and he says, hey, we're thinking, we've heard about this opportunity, and are you interested? Would the people in your county be interested in this project? Because if not, we're not going to pursue it. And so I did my homework, and then I got back to Jeff a week later and said, yeah, it sounds like all systems go on this one. And it's a great project. And I don't know if he wants to talk about it, but okay. But and conversely, you know, if there's a project that I think should be pursued, then I can call up Sonoma Clean Power and say, hey, we have this area that needs some economic development and might be great for a solar field or whatever. And they do their homework and pursue those kind of opportunities too. And lastly, I'd say that, you know, it's important to have a voice at the table. And with PG&E, we don't really have a voice at the table. Right? I think everyone can agree on that. But with Sonoma Clean Power, we do. And so Mendocino County is well represented. And like Jeff said earlier, with this, the plan would be that Lake County would have equal representation too on that board, as well as Mendocino County. And there's also a community advisory committee, and we have a person from Mendocino County who sits on that, and they kind of do the technical studies and everything for Sonoma Clean Power. And you know, so I think that we're well represented. You know, and lastly, they give me because I live in Willits, that they give me the opportunity of attending the meetings in person or Zooming the meetings. And so I think that would be the same for whoever, if you lived in Clearlake or Lakeport and wherever, you know, you could attend the meetings by Zoom at some location like here. Anyway, for those reasons, I think that Sonoma Clean Power is a great organization, and I think that when they reached out to Mendocino County, it was a great move on our part to be part of Sonoma Clean Power. And I would just think that you should really consider it too. All right? Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation and everybody's words and testimonies on. Can you hear me? Yep, there we go. So yeah, from here, I'll open it up to any of the of my colleagues here to ask questions or give some insight. Kenny.
So we've had it explained to us in other meetings that, you know, we have the bill, generation, transmission, distribution, and you're providing strictly generation. And so right now you have 7%. That's what you're succeeding and saving right now on generation, right? Is that what
So not today.
But let's just say 7%.
Well, earlier this year it was 7%. We have had to adjust those savings down dramatically. It's now at about 0.5% because our forecasts are that 2026 we're going to need to cut rates pretty dramatically to offset a giant increase in PG&E's fee that's coming. The fee changes every year. And so we see that coming as early as we can, and then we make moves to protect our customers. So what we did is on September 1, is that right? We increased rates slightly. So that cut the savings down to just 0.5%, is that correct? And then we're using those proceeds in a balancing account, and we'll give all that money back to customers in 2026 to smooth their bill. So that's something we do routinely because we need to protect customers from rate shock.
Okay, well, the question basically goes beyond that. I was just doing some calculations, and if you had 7%, that we would expect to see maybe 3% on PG&E, our total bill because of all the other generation, I mean, not generation, but transmission and distribution. And even if you save 10%, it would probably be still less than a 5% overall on a bill, just so people understand. Right?
So let me correct that. So when we talk about savings, we only talk about the total electric bill.
Oh, total.
So for us to save 7% means we have to have generation rates that are 20-something% below PG&E. So we will, because a customer doesn't care about what one part of the bill costs, they care about the total bill. So we learned that on day one. Is you never tell a customer you have more savings than they see on their bill. And so we only talk about the bottom line.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense because if you had 50% savings on generation, you would get a 25% net savings on the bill. So you have to do way better than 7. You have to do 15, 20, 25 on generation to get 7 or 10% overall on the bill.
Yeah, that's correct. So last year we did have 7% savings, and it cost us almost $50 million of subsidy to give that savings. So it's a huge dollar figure, yeah.
Because that would have been kind of like a bait and switch. Oh, we're saving this on generation, but the bottom line is you save 3%.
Russ, you were next. and then
yeah,
Brad, you're after him.
I asked some questions about the locally generated power. By locally, do you mean the 3 counties, just Lake County in our case, or?
Today, it's just Sonoma and Mendocino counties.
Okay.
But if you join, then we'll say local
3
includes.
counties, so locally would be
yes.
all 3. And then you talk about geothermal. Are you just, because you keep mentioning the geysers, are you just talking about steam-generated geothermal, or are you also including new technologies, which I think hot water?
That's right. So yeah, the universe of possibilities includes, both what you see at the geysers today. That's kind of conventional hydrothermal, where they produce steam directly out of the ground and run it through a turbine, and a lot of new technologies where they maybe only produce hot water and they use heat exchangers and different types of power generation equipment to make power.
So in that case, some of these things that weren't feasible 40 or 50 years ago are now
That's right.
feasible.
It really increases the envelope of where things are viable.
Okay. And what kind of job creation do you think locally generated power could be? I don't know if something has happened in Mendocino County, perhaps that you could.
Yes. So
speak to that.
it's early days. I think the principal component of any of these projects is going to be in construction. So I think a good go by is I think one of the more recent projects in California was built up near Mammoth. And that project, if I recall correctly, I think had 300 or so direct construction jobs. I think it had 10 long-lasting maintenance and operations jobs. And that was a 30 megawatt plant. But obviously, we're looking at scaling it up, to 600 megawatts.
Okay, so hopefully a lot of job creation, because that obviously is important to us as well. After that 10% savings at the bottom line. Thank you. Am I on now? Thank you. First question, the way I'm understanding from the presentation tonight, not necessarily the way I understood it several months ago, is that so all 3 jurisdictions have to have the same decision to join for this to work. In other words, for example, one city couldn't say no, and then the county and another city say yes.
That's the offer that's been presented by our board, yes. And really, as I understand it, the purpose of that is really to find good, strong alignment across your region, and to have a discussion if we don't find it, and just to really pause and say, are we missing something that we haven't attended to?
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that. And then if we were to appoint board members in January of 26, would they be voting members at that time, even though we wouldn't be providing power, or you wouldn't be distributing the power for another year and a half?
So because the board didn't give me written guidance on that or vote on that expressly, what I will ask them to agree to is that you should have voting powers for any matter that affects Lake County whatsoever. And so at least. And I think I would expect, does our board member sitting here back me on that proposal of the full board?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't imagine them saying no to that. I think there might be some small wrinkle about voting on rates that would never apply to your region, like for a time period that only affects Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And so I could imagine a board member saying, wait a minute. And so I'm just freely kind of communicating here, but I would be happy to bring a proposal that if there's any effect whatsoever on Lake County, that you be included in that vote.
Understood. I just wanted to be clear on how that might work at that time. I don't know if you can answer a question about whether or not, so it was 1359, the bill that passed last year. Is that affected by any of the new legislation, the AB 254 or the AB 531 that's expected to be signed at any time?
Those are independent. And the bills that we've introduced in this session it's incremental towards the same goal of cutting through the red tape and allowing smart development to be able to take place in California in a way that it is taking place in a lot of other states today, who are instead selling power into California. So our dollars are flowing to those other states where these projects are getting built. Yes, they're separate and incremental.
Thank you. That's it at this time.
Thank you for the presentation and all the great information. I have two questions. One is, could you speak a little bit more about this economic development aspect outside of job creation? I heard the supervisor kind of just say, hey, I'd like some economic development over there. And there was a way to consider, and I'm just curious what that looks like. To just get a better idea of that. And then after that, I'll share my second question.
We try to tackle that from a lot of different perspectives. So we work with schools starting very early, and a lot of that includes trade support, career technical education, things like that. That's kind of at the beginning of that process. We do community giving, and in fact, our very first donation ever was to Lake County for the 2015 Valley Fire. It was small because we were very young, but we do community giving, and it varies how much we have in that pot each year. But last year we had about 200,000 or so across Sonoma and Mendocino that we were able to give for important nonprofits and events and sponsorships. And then we have an internship program that's incredibly robust. I'm really proud of it. Interns leaving that program have like really, really strong job skills they leave with. And we're starting as young as high school. So we're actually working with folks at the younger end of that spectrum. We do partnerships with some of the colleges. So Mendocino College, we have a scholarship there, and at Sonoma State and Santa Rosa Junior College. And then, of course, there's the direct construction projects, which are still small because that phase of our reality is just happening now. Our first decade, we didn't build anything. We contracted for everything because it's how you get started as an agency. We now have a capital projects division, and they're actually next week starting a remodel on an office building to get their feet wet. And also starting a solar and battery storage project. And we'll be doing another building renovation soon for us, probably next year. And the purpose of that department is really to expand into more and more energy construction projects. So there's more, but I better stop. But basically it gives you a taste of some of how we think about that.
If I could add too, is that the college certainly is amping up their programs for workforce development. And also when you look at, the decreased or the savings, the 7% savings on the energy last year, that businesses are looking at that. And they're saying, hey, we have to, is this a good place to build a factory that's using, $100,000 of electricity each year, or whatever it is. That's also, we're thinking about those kind of terms of economic development too.
Great, thank you. My second question is about the two different plans, the 51% versus the 90%. I think maybe it would be nice to hear just a little bit more. I mean, the basic information was presented, but also if our joint jurisdictions said yes to this, is there an opportunity to change plans after the initial yes?
Yeah, so our default service is really set up to be as clean as possible while being competitive on rates with PG&E. So trying to be cheaper as often as possible. And that's the service that's around 50, is it 50, 51? 51% renewable today. But we also have a significant amount of hydropower in there that doesn't count as renewable in California. So it's quite clean. And the 90% figure is the carbon-free aspect. So if you include renewables plus hydropower, it's about 90%. And the remaining 10%, or 9%, I guess, is natural gas from the system for that service. The premium service we have called Evergreen is optional, and it's something that people have to elect to enter into. And it costs a typical household about how much extra? About $12 extra per month. And it's 100% renewable, and it's 100% locally produced. And it's really the first service of its kind, we think, in the nation. Certainly in California. We've done our homework enough to know it's the first option in California that was 100% local and renewable. And what makes it special is it's renewable every hour of the year. So instead of feeding extra solar into the grid in the daytime and then pulling natural gas power out at night and saying you're 100% renewable, we don't do that. We actually use geothermal and solar, and we match it to your load. And so that's special, and it's actually difficult to do. But that is the only service we know of in the US today that is compliant with California's goals for the year 2045. So California says everybody has to get there by 2045. That's not a lot of time. So we set up that service not just to have a premium local investment in our local economy, but also to try to show California what it's going to take to achieve that policy goal for 2045. And it's not going to be easy to scale that up. And so part of the GeoZone is also proving another pathway to scale that up.
Thank you. And so the plans are household to household?
Yes, and I'm sorry.
Each household
can make their own election. Yeah, so they'll start with Clean Start. If they don't tell us they want anything else, that's the basic default service. And then if they elect for the premium service, they can try that out. And if it's too expensive in any given year, they can call us up, or they can get online and they can opt out or opt down to the standard service. So they can make their own choices.
And I just wanted to highlight here, and correct me if I'm wrong, for anybody who's listening, as I understand it, with a lot of upfront communication, potential customers would know that they can opt out for free before the service starts, and then after that, they can opt out for $5, I believe is your amount for a residence, and I think $25 for a business.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on it, so for 2 months prior to the enrollment month, they can opt out for free. During the enrollment month, they can opt out for free, and for 2 months after. So there's a 5-month window where there's no charge. And then if they do it later, it is a $5 for residential and $25 for commercial.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple questions here. Thank you for your presentation and for coming to the Lakeport City Council back in July when you did. My question is about the distribution, which is still through PG&E. One thing that's really affected Lake County was the public safety power shutoff, the PSPS. Would Sonoma Clean Power have any effect to those PSPS events?
So not directly. And we certainly don't have any control over when they happen. PG&E retains 100% control over that because it's their linemen whose safety is on the line, and it's their liability if they start a fire. So they do retain that sole right. One thing I will share, and I'll brag for a minute, Ryan and his team found an opportunity to advocate for undergrounding a very short section of power lines in our system where there were a huge number of public safety power shutoffs happening, and a vulnerable community of seniors who were getting shut off. And we got that done. So we got PG&E to underground that short section, and that region doesn't have power shutoffs anymore. So that's a huge win. It's hard to find those little cases where we can find that surgical change, but that's something we try to do.
Thank you. And along the same vein with the distributions, being that PG&E would still show us the bill and it would have that distribution, which I brought up at the Lakeport meeting, but has there been any sort of retaliation from PG&E for communities that choose to opt out of their power generation service by raising the distribution part of their bill, or how would that work?
So not in the last 14 years. And so what happened is PG&E did think that the very first one of these programs that launched, it was in Marin, was a threat, and they attacked it. And that was in 2010. Ever since then, PG&E has played ball nicely, and in fact has a web page up. We can share the link about how they are open to this kind of thing, and they will continue serving. We have seen no change in service level at all across any of the CCA territories around California. So that's all of the investor-owned utilities statewide. And I think one of the reasons for that is they can't lose any profit because we exist, unless we win on advocacy. But they don't really earn a profit by selling energy. They earn a profit by building things. And so we don't change that. So and in fact, they don't own very many power plants. This is another misunderstanding in California. Starting in the mid-90s, the big utilities were forced to sell almost all of their power plants, and in the hopes of creating market competition. And so PG&E doesn't own very much anymore. And so they buy power the same way we do today, by contract, by and large.
Thank you. That was my question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is more of a clarification. One of you, I think you mentioned it doesn't change the NEM status with PG&E. For those folks that have solar energy, is there any, that have solar panels on their roofs, is there any downside to being a member of Clean Power?
So no. The only difference between our program and PG&E's program, their NEM program, is that we bill our customers monthly for the energy they use, if it's more than they generated, and PG&E does that annually. That is the only difference. And we have found that customers are really happy that we bill monthly instead of annually. So instead of getting one giant bill at the end of their true-up period, they pay that over the course of the year. My favorite example is my father-in-law refused to join Sonoma Clean Power in the beginning, and he had a large solar array, and he got a $5,000 true-up bill, and because he had not looked at his bill all year long, he didn't realize that his inverter had gone out. And so if he had been a Sonoma Clean Power customer, he would have found that out the first month it went out, and he quickly switched after that.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I have that surprise of the true-up as well. So, thank you.
Supervisor Owen? And then you were next.
Yeah. And what about the rebates that solar gets? Would you still provide them, or would PG&E still be providing them?
So PG&E right now for Lake County handles the generation and delivery, but they only actually will pay out customers on the delivery side. So if you stayed with PG&E, you'd get your generation credits at the end of the year. With SCP, we also give you generation credits. So you would no longer see those credits through PG&E. You would see them through Sonoma Clean Power, and our rates are the same as PG&E's for that.
Just real quick, there was a mention about the power safety shutoffs, and I wanted to emphasize, I know we talked before, and you mentioned that of course, is a PG&E. They would be, attending to that matter. But you mentioned advocacy and whatnot in the community. Would you all still be helping with the resource centers or anything like that when it comes to these power safety shutoffs?
We haven't to date, but we are talking about how to support emergency operations and community resource centers in the future. And so it's an idea that we've been working on. Examples might be, how can we help fuel the power resource centers with less diesel and cleaner air? How could we provide storage, battery storage, for example, for customers who are vulnerable? And so that's the kind of idea that gets batted around in the committee and the board, and could be a future opportunity for an investment that we make. It's not something we've done yet.
And just real quick, I'm just going to have to mention this because you mentioned hydro. And as you know, the elephant in the room is we have a Lake Pillsbury, which is by Scott Dam, which is a hydroelectric power generating source. And I know before, I think you mentioned something about clean, it's clean energy or it's not clean energy. Can you elaborate? And are you looking into any types of ventures to that arena?
So I'll take the easy question first. So in California, hydro projects that are 50 megawatt or 30 megawatts or larger are not called renewable. And if they're smaller than 30 megawatts, they are renewable. That is purely a policy reason. There's no physical reason for that. So I think it probably has a history in opposition to building new large dams, is my guess of where that came from. So that's the easy question. The hard question about would we be interested in working on Lake Pillsbury, I understand it's a complicated situation, and I could only possibly answer that if I took your lead. I could not possibly venture to say what the right move is on that. To date, our board has stayed away from that project and said we need to let the local folks figure this out. And so I really haven't even read up on it much, and so I'm not up to date.
Well, everyone on the board is near it and local to it, so I'll just mention that. But, who is next? Go ahead, Councilman Parley.
So the thing that strikes me the most, the one slide showed they saved $4,000 at a senior center and $60,000 at a treatment plant, and small retail $17,000. That sounds like way more money than they're going to save on electricity. And what does that program, when we sign up with SCP, what does that program look like? I mean, you call in to customer service in Sonoma County and say, I'd like to get an energy audit, take a look at my rates. Go ahead.
So for those examples that I showed, those had nothing to do with additional energy efficiency programs or new lighting, refrigeration. It was simply that customer was put on the wrong rate by PG&E.
That's exactly what I was asking. Okay.
And the majority of that savings for the customer, because it's demand charges, not energy per se, it is PG&E who takes the majority of that less revenue, say, compared to Sonoma Clean Power. So it's just all good for the customer. We do these kind of audits through our 230,000 customers whenever possible to see if we can find a way to save them money. And if we can, we bring that to them.
Okay, one other advocacy question. This has been a pet peeve of mine is public purpose programs that are on everybody's bill, and they run about 6%. And if you use $700 in a month and your neighbor uses $100, they're going to pay less, much less than you are. And I contacted a winery this week, and their public purpose program bill for 1 month was $2,100 in July. In my business, in the summer, we have the grocery store retailers, their refrigeration is just screaming in the summer. My bill goes up 94% in September, in July, August, and September, 94%. Does your advocacy group and your experts, would they be willing to get involved in like normalizing that? Because it's not fair just because it got hot that we're paying 94% more, or the winery's paying more. And I can't even imagine about hotels, motels, casinos. I understand that Worldmart pays $80,000 a month. At 6%, that's $4,800. And in January, with a little bit of the gas heaters in their fireplaces, it could be huge differences. And this is money that's just fleeting, that is taking away discretionary income from the public and the ability to pay more employees and do upgrades.
I think your question is better taken as a statement, which is a desire to push back. And I hear that as music to my ears. So California's energy costs are too high, and we often advocate for trimming costs here and there or rationalizing them and making them make more sense. One of the reasons this ended up on your power bill is that in California, you only need a simple majority of a vote in Sacramento to put a policy cost onto a power bill, but you need a 2/3 majority to pass tax. So all the things that should have been taxes, if they were valuable, ended up on the power bill. And so that's one of the reasons our bills are high. And so we often do try to push back on things like that. But this is the kind of input that happens on our board every month. So I appreciate that.
Supervisor Sabatier, I can do it next, and then Helen, I can.
So I did want to thank Mr. Cipher, also Mr. Horton. Saw you guys a couple of times outside of our normal meetings that we had with my colleague, Chair Crandall. Lots of conversation and understand what you're doing in Sonoma County and Mendocino County. I see and understand the potential benefits. I'll say that since I have not experienced that yet. And my comments will not be to identify those benefits, but more of my concerns and the caution because bills are extraordinarily high. 2 years out of the 10, I believe, your bills showed that they were higher than PG&E. So this is not an automatic decrease. This is a fluctuating up and down, and sometimes there may be droughts. Sometimes there may be the opposite. And it's hard to tell the future, especially with the power PG&E has. And I don't think we're going to have a debate over how we all feel about PG&E and the prices that we have to pay for electricity. So I'm going to start off with the membership. I do have a concern about the membership. I mean, it was even stated here of equal voice, and that's not necessarily, in my opinion, true. There's a 11-member board, 2 of which are from Sonoma County, and 9 which are from Sonoma County, and you would be offering us 2 members as well, making it 13. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that. If the reason is population, I think there's arguments against that, because Windsor is 25,000, Sebastopol 7,000, Cloverdale is 8,000. Sonoma is 10,000. That's not even 60,000 people yet being represented by 4 separate seats, and yet and not counting Sonoma County. So that would be 5 seats if you added the county, and Lake County would be offered 2 with 68,000, and Mendocino has more than 68,000 and also has 2. So I feel like the branch that's being offered is not a partnership; it's kind of a tag along. And I would love to see a rework of what does that equity actually look like if Lake County does join, just because I want to make sure that the voice does matter. I'm not so concerned about the rates, the financing. I think it's been proven that you guys do a good job of running your business. I'm worried about the new venture that's happening, and that would be the GeoZone. And there's some potential benefits. We've talked about economic development. We've talked about clean energy, all of the stuff that we're looking for. But there's also some drawbacks. Power grids, power stations are not exactly your neighborly property. This is a highlight in the map of geothermal Lake County bordering into Sonoma County. We are a big blob on the map of where geothermal can be. So it's an opportunity, but it's also an opportunity we need to take with caution. Right now, it doesn't sound like you have any project, or maybe none that you should speak of at this moment in time. And I feel that part of the opportunity of coming to Lake County, granted, we did ask to see if there was still a possibility. But part of you coming here is the excitement of all the changes that have happened at the federal level, at the state level, that have stayed with geothermal and have shut down some of the other opportunities to really get some tax credits or some other incentives to be able to pursue those types of developments. And again, we're kind of the highlight of an area that have those opportunities for you, and you need to generate more electricity. The GeoZone concerns me in the sense that you attempted to pass AB 531, which you kind of skirted a little bit of explaining what that was. And I'm going to ask you to correct me in case I'm incorrect. But AB 531, beforehand, the law stated that if it was above 50 megawatts, that there would be certain restrictions that would be taken away, that 50 megawatts was important to put in, and that this is now below 50 megawatts, those same restrictions would be taken away, meaning our setbacks, our geothermal setbacks, would not be looked at as being a restriction, they would be overpassed. Because we had conversations about possibly looking at making some slight changes to AB 531 that would say that we would respect the setbacks in Lake County for geothermal. The fact that you're trying to pass such a law that would take away local control on where we place geothermal power plants, that concerns me. And I get it, you're running a business, you need to do what you need to do, but at the same time, that's how I feel PG&E would treat us as well, by just saying we're coming in and doing something, right? I know that I've heard from Supervisor Haschak, thank you for coming today, good to see you, that basically if you say it's not good for my community, it doesn't happen. I have to see that. I've been on boards where that's not always the case. So I maybe that's one example, but it concerns me that, again, we're highlighted and there's the need for energy and you're trying to pass a bill that would overpass some of our restrictions, and yet here we are. There is a liability to join. You said there was no liability. If by chance, let's say you go into a 5-year drought where it's more expensive and we want to pull out, you've stated to us in previous meetings that if you purchase contracts for energy, that those contracts would either we'd have to wait 20 to 25 years to be able to get out of those contracts or pay them off, which could be in the millions, tens of millions of dollars, because these are long-term contracts. So there is a liability in case, not you, but PG&E, the state, or someone else changes the structure in which you exist that no longer has the benefits that you currently get to experience. So I just wanted to kind of fix that. So I'm done with my statements. I wanted to make those statements clear. I want to give you a chance to respond before I ask my questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm glad you are taking this seriously because I wouldn't have it any other way. We want a partner that has kicked the tires and understands this. So on the board seats, part of that is a history. When we launched, we had no expectation we would ever expand outside of Sonoma County. And so the deal that was cut is every jurisdiction would get a seat, and every item to be passed would have to get a majority of the vote. And the only way that the big guys could veto something is if they had a majority of the load. They could block something, but they could never pass something. So they would still have to have a popular vote to pass any item. And so that's the history of where every jurisdiction in Sonoma County got a seat. When Mendocino asked, actually, when Lake County asked in 2015, we said, oh, shoot, we have to think about the potential for expansion and create a policy about how this might actually unfold in the future, so that when Mendocino asked, we actually had a policy in place that was ready to go. And at that point, we were really thinking that taking away board seats from the small cities was not going to be something the small cities would approve, and we'd need their approval to do that. And so going to a load-weighted voting system or like a revenue-weighted voting system or a customer-weighted voting system would mean Santa Rosa would get a ton more votes, and all the small cities in Sonoma County wouldn't get anything, or they would have to share a seat. And Lake County would get 2 votes, and Mendocino would get 2 votes. And so where we ended up was the viable political pathway there was to keep what we got and then try to have proportional representation relative to the region we're serving. And in the case of Mendocino, it was 2. In the case of Lake, it's two seats. So that's the history of that. I understand that may not be agreeable, but that's the history. One thing on AB 531 is that I don't believe it would change how the setback zone is treated. Am I correct in that, Ryan?
Well, so within the geo zone, I think like in the resolution we put together, our promise is to respect local ordinances. We would not go into geo zone partnerships with companies that do not respect those. Now, AB 531 does give the state authority to step in and overwrite local ordinances. It does give them that authority with the opt-in process.
Which they have now if they order procurement through DWR, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I would love to go back and try to get the interest in getting that clause into 531 happened late enough that the governor's office pushed back on us and said, we don't want to cut that deal this late in the session. I'd be happy to go back and work on how to have that setback zone respected, because that's fully our intent. And I think even if Lake County joins, that could be stated in your joining that must be respected. So I'm happy with that.
And I think also just to reinforce it, the reason that SCP passed AB 531, the reason we did that was not to overwrite local jurisdiction. We're obviously very strongly in favor of local jurisdiction. That's why we passed AB 1359, which brought it to the counties. The reason that AB 531 was structured like that is because that was the only pathway that we saw to get access to a lot of the benefits that the opt-in program provides. So it has strict timelines for how long a permit has to be done by. It has a limited amount of days that people can file litigation. It has a lot of things that give developers who are California curious, who are looking in Utah, Nevada, to say, okay, like this is a serious signal that maybe we can actually get things permitted in California. And we saw that as really important. And I think as Jeff mentioned, I think we would love an opt-in process that has local jurisdictions in the driver's seat. It's just that structure doesn't exist yet, and that's a much bigger lift than what we bit off.
And I think the last thing I'll respond to is that you talked about a really black swan event where things go really bad. The liability, the strict financial liability, even in that case, doesn't flow through to your jurisdiction or to your customers because all of the customers can opt out in that case. That likely means that this agency has a problem, and this agency could eventually, in that worst case scenario, go bankrupt. But there's no recourse, and I hope your counsel has kicked the tires on this, for a creditor to come through to a member. And that's pretty well settled law in California, that JPAs do shield the members from the liabilities of the JPA, so long as we've respected the firewall through all our operations. So one of the things that means is we can't be sending your general fund cash, and we can't be asking money from you in cash from your general fund. Because if we start doing that, now we're no longer operating like a JPA with that strict firewall. And then there are risks that can happen. So if there's anything to add to that, I can turn to our counsel, but is that a fair representation? Okay. I think that's the last thing I'll respond to.
And I appreciate that. I do want to add one more thing about the AB 531. It does open it up to not just those that are within this idea or document called the geo zone. So anybody from the entire international industry of generating electricity could come in and utilize that state law that overcomes our setbacks and things like that. So it's just that's where my concerns come from. So my first question to you is, if there is the moment where you are actually more expensive than PG&E, what is the level of transparency that is brought to the customers so they're aware? And are we allowed as a jurisdiction to help them be aware, or is there a liability on us if you start seeing opt-outs come from them? Because I represent people.
Right.
I may be a member of your board, but overall, I represent people. That's why I'm in this chair in the first place. And my job is to make sure that they recognize the current status and the situation. So what is the potential liability to ensure that our people are aware that they have an opportunity, if they wish to opt out? Because right now it's more expensive than just going to PG&E.
I think the way I'd answer this is, first of all, we do publish our rates. They're always live on our website. We also have a phone number that people can call anytime. We can talk about rates. We can even get PG&E on the line to confirm what we're saying, which from time to time, that three-way call is actually really valuable just to build trust with customers. So we, as a public agency, we need to have that full transparency about what rates are. To your second question, I think what I'd say is, if our rates go above PG&E by a few percent because of business reasons that will protect customers from a worse rate shock later, I would hope that we're joining as a partnership that doesn't include a massive PR campaign to try and convince all customers to opt out. I would hope that you would agree that surviving that short-term event is worth the price of the overall mission and the long game of the savings and the benefits to the community. I think if we're getting started in a partnership where there's an expectation that if rates go above at all, ever, that we should tell everyone to opt out and run newspaper stories and scream that, this is the best option, I think we shouldn't get into the partnership, because that does add some serious risks to the agency that makes it more brittle and less likely to be successful in the long run. So I think that's how I would answer it.
Appreciate that. Next question is, you mentioned tribal engagement, Supervisor Haschak mentioned being in Covelo. Those are their own jurisdiction, their own sovereign land. If we all say yes, are they automatically opted in, or are they completely separated out because they have their own jurisdictions and need to go through the same process? I almost understood it as if we are automatically opting them in, and so I'm slightly concerned and wanting to
Thank you
clarify
for
that.
giving me a chance to speak to this. So it will shock no one that California did not consider tribes when they passed the law forming CCAs. And so what the law, AB 117, says is that CCA decisions are made for a region based on votes of the counties and cities in that region. They didn't mention tribes. And so one of the reasons I have not asked for tribal engagement yet here is it has felt hugely disingenuous for me to go to a tribe and say, what's your opinion? And then have California law tell me I can't respect their opinion. And so I have every intention of doing tribal outreach the second any decision is made, to inform them of their rights and ability to leave if they don't want to be. But they will have access to this program if Lake County votes. Then all of the county, all of the region area tribes will have access to this program and have default service from SCP, just like today they have it from PG&E. So I'm embarrassed to sit here and say as a Californian that tribes weren't included in that law. I've consulted with Redwood Coast Energy Authority that has a longer standing history of engaging with tribes than we do. We do have a tribal liaison in the last year and have begun that work more seriously. They have advised me that fixing state law in that matter is probably not the solution, and their tribes have agreed with that. They've advised that having the tribal engagement about solutions is way more important, about having engagement about how to avoid the NEM true-up problem. We had, in fact, one of our tribes in our existing territory got free solar, and everyone saw their bills drop to near zero, and so they bought air conditioning for the first time. And nobody told them about the true-up. So at the end of the year, they got $5,000 bills, and it was devastating. And so that's the kind of thing that Redwood Coast has flagged as being incredibly important, is the access to informed choices, having an advocate to go to bat. And that's what they're pushing me to consider. And I will take that as good advice until I get better advice here.
And I appreciate that. And I think that if today it was just the Board of Supervisors getting ready to make a decision and not inviting the cities, I would expect the cities to be upset for not being here. And I think it's a missed opportunity to not invite tribal government to this meeting so we at least can hear from them if our decision will be having an impact on them. So I think it's a missed opportunity. My last question is, our air quality district checks for hydrogen sulfide over at our geysers, and also there are ripple effects of, I guess pun intended, of earthquakes due to the geysers. What is the output coming from this new technology that you're looking into? Are they similar and at a lesser degree, or similar?
Sure. So, yeah, a lot of the new systems that are being proposed for geothermal development use what's called a binary system. So right now, existing geysers, the steam goes directly through a turbine. You know, some of it ends up being vented, to atmosphere. The new systems, that does not happen. All of the produced fluids are re-injected into the ground, and the heat's extracted through a separate process. So the hydrogen sulfide or other types of geologic emissions are not an impact. Seismicity, I'd say it's still early days with a lot of these technologies. We've talked a little bit about, there's this demonstration project in Utah so far. There are a lot of positive signs about being able to do that operation and be able to respond and minimize seismicity. Calpine right now, they've got the seismic array, they've got the seismic committee. If you look at their progress over time, you've seen really, applying, engineering principles and operational strategies to the geysers has had beneficial impacts over time. Granted, they're still there, but yeah, it's something we're closely monitoring. It's something that when we're talking to partners is a really top concern, is how do you design these projects and locate them and plan? Because seismicity is definitely one of the number one concerns we hear when we talk to community members.
Anyone else from? Oh, Helen, go ahead. Supervisor Owen. Sorry about that.
Thank you again. And I would like to also say thank you for going out and reaching out to our town halls around the county. I really appreciate it. And I know that that's something you haven't been asked to do in the past. But I know it was also an important endeavor to let the people know that they are positive, you know, they're the ones we are here to serve. So that was really important. I did appreciate that. I did get some feedback, both sides of it. And one of them was, I think the question was already asked about whether they would still get their credits from their solar. And that I'm glad to know that, because I know that they'd asked that particular question. I wanted to confirm it because they were a little ambiguous on it. I know that Supervisor Crandall had mentioned, and when I first met you, actually, I mentioned it, and that was, I know that there's the Pillsbury issues. What I'm all about is I want to see more built. I have concerns about signing contracts, and I'll get into that in a moment. The building and creating more electricity is exciting to me. It's something I'm all about. And I know that you guys have been told to stay away from the Pillsbury with a 10-foot pole, but if we were to get that somehow, some of those issues fixed, is that something you may be interested in if we get through some of the legal processes? Where you could, what we would look for is a partner that would be interested in that. I also love the idea of the closed loop system, as it does not require as much water. And I think I'd mentioned to you, when I met with you, my family is all retired from the geysers. I worked up there myself, mostly piloting and doing business up there with subcontractors. But nevertheless, I was all over the mountains there. And I have a love for the geothermal, and it is a clean energy. So staying out of the geo zones, we do have still room that's still up there where plants are down. There's a number of plants that are still in place that are no longer viable. So putting you on the spot, would Pillsbury, if we were to able to get through some of the legal issues with that, is that something you might be interested in?
I think the short answer is yes. It's difficult for me. First of all, I cannot speak for our board. So
Sure,
I'm sitting
absolutely.
here as staff and saying I will always take a recommendation to look into something, especially if it's coming from a board member. And so we have to leave all the options on the table. We can't be picky anymore. We have to do this work quickly because there's not a lot of time to get it right. And so I would absolutely be open to that. I think my reticence is just getting up to speed with understanding the issues, which I'm aware I don't have under my belt. So.
Sure, and I know that they've been kind of under a dark cloud, you might say, and I think that's been in the intention to be able to close it, and I don't think that cloud is quite as dark as what has been meant for people to believe. So if that's something that's something I would be hugely interested in, as well as, like I said, the closed loop system. I know that you guys aren't doing it, but there are people doing that, and that was a really exciting program. Now let me change pages. Okay, I have a question about the opting in and out. So everybody's in. You know, at one point at our board meetings, when you were here, and refresh my memory on this, if a certain number of people, if a percentage opted out, what percentage would it be that it may end up kind of going on to other tax or ratepayers? Was there something, or was that unclear? Did I mess that up? That's possible.
So I see Ryan kind of looking to say something too, so I'll let him speak second. The quick answer is that varies over time, but we do have a fair amount of room to absorb significant opt-outs without having to impact other ratepayers. And the way we do that is we buy a certain amount of our energy on fixed price contracts that are long term, but we leave some room open to buy very short term energy, and we do that to adjust to be able to be flexible. The other thing is any number of opt outs before service starts is very easy to weather.
Sure.
Because that's how we plan. Is in fact, we want the people who are going to opt out as soon as possible.
Sure.
They're happier, and we don't have to worry about them opting out later. So we actually do a huge amount of communication before service starts to say, if you really don't want this, we're going to help you leave and not have it. And so that's an even easier thing to absorb. So it's not a fixed percentage, but we could absorb a fair amount.
And then what kind of, like, say if there's a big amount, because I think I had asked this exact question, but I didn't get a figure on the percentage when we were in our meeting, and I was just trying to tie you down on that, to be honest. Is it 20% that it would go, that it might affect the ratepayers that are still left, and they might have to absorb some of it?
It's honestly, so it's very insensitive to that. So I think when we're looking at, like, as Jeff mentioned, we're going to be cautious about when we roll on new long-term contracts with Lake. So, Lake County represents a 15% increase in our load. So we'll probably wait to see what percentage of people decide to enroll with us initially. And our experience, and other CCA's experience, has been that number, once it's set from the initial rollout, stays pretty much the same. Our participation rate stays pretty much the same after that initial rollout. So the only issue with a really big opt-out rate, so the study assumed 90% of people stick with SCP service. The only problem with a 10%, 20% opt-in rate, which would be very extreme from what's been experienced, is that there is an amount of fixed cost. That in the feasibility study, I think it was about $500,000 for rollout that we were planning on amortizing over that load. But that's a very small component of the total cost. So even if you have those extreme scenarios, it's really not that impactful to the rates.
Yeah, and that was, of course, after, the time had passed. So that was a question. And then I still have a concern, to be honest, about the buyout. If, for whatever reason, new technology comes around, which you guys are actually trying to do. So it might not be an issue, but it's still the elephant in the room for me. Where we don't even have a financial cost on what it would be to opt out, and it takes 20 years, basically, is what you had mentioned. And the 20 years starts the day that we say we want out. So if June of 2030, if we say, you know what, this isn't working, we're constantly higher, we want out, it's 20 years from then, or we can get hit with this big, huge bill, millions.
Let me walk through that. So any customer, including a city or a county, can opt out at any time. So opt out. So I want to distinguish opt out from forcing everyone else to leave. So if you want to force everyone in the county to leave our program, that's when the timeline starts. And the timeline could be as long as 20 years, but it also could be shorter. And the reason is we do sign, some of our contracts are for 20 years in duration. And if those contracts are beneficial to us to resell, then we don't need to have you wait.
Okay.
But if they're above the price we can resell them at, then we can't pass on those losses to every other customer in our system. So that's how that works. So I just wanted to be clear, it's only when you want to force everyone out that the timeline starts. And we have no expectation any jurisdiction would ever pay a fee to get out. The fee would be too high.
Oh,
it is a pathway in our JPA. Technically, it's a legal pathway, but like you said, it's tens, or in the case of Santa Rosa, it could be hundreds of millions of dollars, like a big jurisdiction.
Yeah,
so
30 to 100.
nobody has that money. So what the reality is somebody who wants to exit our program completely and force all customers to leave would make a formal request and say, what's the soonest we can leave at no expense? And in the meantime, the customers could individually choose to opt out in advance.
Yeah, and not to be kind of getting sideways or anything. The reason that was brought up was because there's been some talk by somebody about possibly looking into sometime in the future, looking at being able to supply our own energy, and but that would be more, I would think, because I know when I first got on the board, I thought, why don't we start looking at doing energy because of Lake Pillsbury, right? So it was more along those lines.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was very interesting to hear about the non-role of the tribes. And I understand you're representing what the California law has to say, and it puts you a little bit between a rock and a hard spot. But I would really like it if somehow our jurisdictions could ponder what kind of conversation would be appropriate to have, would be helpful to have with the tribes prior to, we don't have a lot of time if this is to be voted on in October, of course. There's going to be a yay or a nay in October unless we're going to push it out for another year. But that feels very disrespectful, and I understand how it's built in and it's not intended to be disrespectful, but I agree with Supervisor Sabatier that that would not feel well at all. And then we go back to our tribal partners later and we say, hey, now we're going to give you this information about these other helpful things, but it's sort of, puts the tribes, I could see where the tribes might feel disenfranchised from that whole decision-making process. So I just would love to figure out what is the best possible thing that could be done to reach out in advance, given this short time frame. I don't know what that looks like, and then what it looks like after the fact here. I don't know. I just feel like no conversation feels like a void to me that somehow we should address. And what I'm saying here, that doesn't take away from whatever value I see in this for our region. I just think it's a huge hole and something I'd like to find a way to do better at.
If I may briefly, I want to give county staff credit. They did, and their tribal liaison did help us send notice to tribes about some of these meetings. So I want to thank them for doing that. That's not the same as face-to-face meetings. So I completely respect your request and would love to help you fulfill it. What we've done across the rest of our region is have that kind of engagement later, and it has gone well. Because it's a new option for them, and we're meeting with them prior to service beginning. We're letting them know well in advance, before anything happens in terms of service, that we could proactively opt them out if they wish. So they still are in charge of that decision. They don't have to necessarily do it after the fact. And I would be happy to set up meetings with every tribe here to have that conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. And it also occurs to me that if the decision is made to move forward, that there's a year in between that initial decision to move forward and the actual, beginning of service. And that's a good amount of time to try to have those conversations.
It would be likely that we'll invite the tribes to that meeting when we decide, just to make sure that they have input and insight during that specific meeting. Because when you really look at it, again, it's one of those state, I think you mentioned, I'm finding out today when you mentioned it after Supervisor Sabatier asked, it's the state that neglected to, notice the tribes, which is, that's what happens sometimes. But once and if that changes, you also have to consider that each tribe is, they're their own government as well. And so, like, hypothetically, we would have 7 more, 14 more, right? Because you had, or I don't know, there's different numbers. So you would have all of those different municipalities and governments and sovereign nations to talk to. So I don't know. That's how it could look. If you really look around with that. But we do have our tribal liaison, Terry Logston, who can assist with myself. Of course, luckily I serve as the vice chair of my tribe. I can let them know kind of what I've already been briefing them, but other tribes can, when we meet with them or when Terry and I speak with them about specific things, we can add this to the dialogue and also ensure that they're invited to that meeting so they can have some say and some engagement in this as well. So, any other comments?
Well, I simply wanted to, I wonder if providing the information somehow in advance prior to that one very pivotal meeting, that's where I'm just trying to brainstorm how that might look, because I would imagine hearing a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, if that's the first time when a good amount of information, they've had opportunity to look at a good amount of information. So perhaps through the liaison from the county, and even if the cities had a role in that, I don't know if we wanted to, not here tonight, we don't need to think about that, but I would just, it just seems like it would feel a lot better to be able to have a bit of a dialogue and some information sharing prior to, final decisions.
Go ahead, Councilmember Downey.
So my question is geothermal energy the only source SCP is interested in here in Lake County?
We'd love to get your own opportunities from Lake County itself, but this is a good region for solar. It's a good region for battery storage. There might be wind opportunities here. I don't know, but and we've heard about interest in hydro. Really, we have left all the opportunities on the table throughout our region, and I see Lake County as no different. So wind power is not a good opportunity in coastal areas of California because permitting it is so difficult. And so a lot of Sonoma County's wind opportunity is just not really present. So that may be something that's different. But other than that, we're looking at pretty similar technologies across all three counties as far as our opportunities. Yeah.
So that kind of leads into my next question. Lake County is, if you just step outside, it's nature, it's mountains, it's waters, it's trees and grapes. So that's kind of like the vision that we see when we see Lake County. So how does SPC coming into Lake County affect that vision? Are we going to be flooded with solar panel farms like how we see in Bakersfield and in SoCal? So how does that look for us?
We would have to follow your lead, and with Lake on the board would be steering that with voices from Lake County. So nothing can happen in our region without the support of the local folks. It's too easy to stop a project if the local government doesn't want it to happen. And so we don't even start. Like if we think there's going to be serious local opposition to something, we either have to spend the time with the community to change their mind, which can happen, or we need to walk away and find a better project. And so the best possible outcome is when jurisdictions come to us and say, we think there's an opportunity here, you should take a look at it. Then that's golden, because then we're already halfway through the court of public opinion at that point. So it really needs to be steered by local voices and by the representation on our board. But to give you an example, in Mendocino County, Supervisor Hashek mentioned, consulting on a solar project we wanted to do there. And that's proving to be a really good process because we had local elected support. We're finding land that's in a really good place where the local community, I think, is going to be really good with it. And at a scale that the local community can support. The idea of hundreds or thousands of acres of solar panels is just the Central Valley kind of model for solar doesn't really apply here. This is rugged terrain. It's beautiful. There's a lot of gorgeous land here. I don't think that's really ever going to be in the cards. So I would imagine these are smaller solar arrays. I would imagine it's a mix of resources as well. So.
Sorry, I have one last question on that. With real estate, how does that work in obtaining land and that sort of stuff? Like, how do you get your land to put all these solar panels or?
So for projects that we own, which would be smaller projects for the next decade or so as we continue to mature, we would initially option a parcel of land and then work with the local zoning and permitting to ensure that what we're proposing is going to be viable on that site. And if it proves viable and we can get a use permit, then we would close the purchase of that land and then start construction at that point. So that's the normal pathway. There could be unusual properties. We're working with one of our member jurisdictions on land that they own, and that's a special case where we're just looking at those properties. We haven't decided one of them is interesting yet, but if Lake County itself or one of the cities owned land that wanted to develop a resource, that's a kind of special case where we make sure the whole board is briefed, make sure we're going through carefully the legal process of that, and then we'd eventually end up with either a lease or a fair market value purchase decision at that point.
Sorry, one more. The board consists of more members that would have representatives from Lake County. What if there was a situation where we didn't want a certain project going on in a certain area in Lake County, but we were outvoted by the board members on, representing Sonoma County? How does that work?
So we're not a permitting authority ourselves. So it's still, any project that our agency pursues still has to be permitted by another lead agency. And in the case of Lake County, it would normally be Lake County or the cities that would be the lead agency. And so that's being outvoted. First of all, I think would be incredibly rare. It's never happened in our entire 11-year history so far, because that just leads to all kinds of problems when you're forcing a region to accept something they don't want. I think it'd be the beginning of the end of the agency, frankly, if we started doing that. But if that did happen, there's still a local permitting checkpoint.
With that, we'll open it up for public comment. If you would have any questions or have any comments, concerns about this workshop, please come up and we'll give you 3 minutes.
It's working now? Good. I want to thank you all you elected officials here and the audience and everybody that came out. And Sonoma Clean Power. Jeff, good presentation. But I'm here in opposition myself. And because what we heard tonight is a one-sided argument. What we need to do is we need to sit down with a meeting with PG&E and get their position on losing the generation income. I just looked at my last 2 bills. 60% of the revenue on my last 2 bills was generation. Also, what effect will this income loss have on post-wildfire rebuilding response by PG&E, who does send out an army right now and build stuff back really fast? Partly because it's the right thing to do, they have an obligation to do it, but there's also, they lose money when nobody's back there in their houses again. What's the effect on the undergrounding for Lake County, which we all want, and we want as much as we want? If they lose this income stream, are they still going to have enough money for $1 million a mile to underground? That's their plans, and that's their estimates of what the costs are. On to another point. In the contract, I read the contracts that they proposed here a couple of years ago, and in the contract, there's an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, that you'll also be signing, being asked to sign. This NDA, what it does is it keeps secrets, just like a closed session of a board of supervisors or a city council. And it may conflict, actually, with the Brown Act regarding closed session meeting rules. Secrets that they wanted to keep in this NDA are proprietary things that they do, which that goes to fracking. What goes in the ground in a fracking process they like to hold it as proprietary. I had a conversation with Jeff a couple weeks ago. He said they weren't going to do that, but it is in that NDA. What if Jeff goes away and he's not the CEO any longer? There's speculation in the contract that I have and in my own, not heard anything about it, but that there's probably, I've seen a lot of contracts in my life, being in construction all my life, hold harmless agreements in there regarding anybody that they use for drilling or anybody that pollutes the water or the land here. There probably is that in that contract too, that you'll be voting on the sign. In the CEQA process, they want all properties possible up to 20, if they want to build 20 of these smaller geothermal units on one EIR. And obviously it's to save money. And this may not be adequate for mitigation in industrial use permits and underground fracking and well monitoring.
Sure, if you could wrap up, your timer went off, but we'll let you go ahead and wrap
Did it already go?
Yeah, but you can wrap up.
Okay, well, I'll just go right to the end of it then. I urge a no vote by everybody here. In the worst case scenario of what my wishes are, I would like to see a postponement for a year so we could have this conversation with PG&E, have the conversation with the tribes, which brought up. I didn't even think about that until I heard it tonight, and get some more resolve on why we need it. I don't think we need this. PG&E, I just got a bill in the mail. I just got a letter in the mail the other day. Their rates are, as of September 1, down over 2%. They've got a reduction. We just got it. So PG&E is not just always raising the prices. That's it. Thank you guys all.
Thank you. Oh, she's got it. It went off. I heard them in the back. Yeah. Yep, she's got it.
Hello, everyone. Lisa Marie Benavides. I am an Upper Lake resident, and I sit on the Worth Municipal Advisory Committee. And I just want to say I also urge a no or a postponement for now. I've spoken to many community residents, both on Facebook and in the Max. And while I do see a positive impact for the community, and I truly think it's a noble cause, that's really important and customers should be able to opt into. I really don't like you have to opt out. You can't guarantee decreased fire risk. You can't decrease the number of outages. You can't guarantee lower rates. That's what we want a voice at the table for PG&E. For the geo zone, there was a comment made, maybe Lake County residents agree with a moratorium on geothermal energy. That's not what it is. We are looking for thoughtful consideration that ensures Lake County residents stay at the epicenter of decisions that involve Lake County resources. That's what we want. Right now, we have 100% voting authority. If we say yes, and you're still forming the plan, and then the plan goes south for Lake County residents, our decision-making authority decreases to 15%, and then under 8% for municipalities like mine. I believe we're being asked to sign a blank contract without reading the fine print under the promise that the intentions are good. Historically, it is the most vulnerable that is harmed by that practice. I also just want to reiterate a point that the law excluding tribal communities, as it has since colonization, should not remove the responsibility of community agencies to ensure they are at the table. It is disappointing to hear that a decision that could be made impacting a significant number of our neighbors without actively seeking their input. They deserve the same respect that the Macs get. Thank you.
Lisa. Any other public comment?
Is this on?
Yep.
Good evening, board and city council members and SCP. I've attended probably more of these town hall sessions with SCP than Jeff has. So I've seen them all. The only ones I haven't seen are the city council ones, and I apologize for that. I think someone just mentioned this is like a one-sided argument, and I understand that for a large portion of it, I think I tend to agree. There's one thing here that Jeff has knows I'm going to bring up, and that's the geozone. When this thing whole started in the Board of Supervisors meeting back in the spring, it was made clear the geozones were not going to be part of the conversation. And then in June, the SEC board said, make it a requirement. And then Supervisor Owen said, we need to have this communication out to the community so they know what we're talking about. In virtually all of those communications and all of those town hall meetings, the geozone was not brought up. It hasn't been brought up in this meeting. Has anyone here actually seen the map? If you saw the map, you would see that maybe 1% of Mendocino in a very, very remote area is in the geozone. Maybe 5-10% of Sonoma is in the geozone. Not a very large population. Cloverdale's in it, but not much more. The Lake County, it's the entire southern western side of our county is in what they have declared to be the geozone. Half of our people, if not more, live in that geozone. And there's nothing to say that that is the limit to where they would like to put in plants. The new technology is exciting, but it's not guaranteed. It's still in development. The closed loop system, the deep well, the shallow well, the high temp, the low temp, those are all exciting things, but none of it is on the table. Now today we've heard, well, we want the county to agree to the idea of a geozone, but the devil's in the details. What is an idea? How do you commit to an idea? What does that actually mean for our county? What are we going to actually commit to? That needs to be fleshed out because there's a lot of money and a lot of people, and we do have tourism here. We do have agriculture here. I don't think we want to look like Bakersfield with grasshopper wells every quarter mile as you drive down the road. Yes, there's technology that doesn't have hydrogen sulfide going in, but it's not to say that isn't what's going to happen. We don't know enough about the geozone, and when we ask about it, it's not shared. Just to close, the idea that this is going to replace gas, I respectfully ask that you take a look at the CPUC. Gas is going to go away anyway, and by 2035, there'll still be 15 to 20% as required. So the geothermal plan is simply organic growth, not to replace additional or change the overall portfolio plan that California already has. So finally, I will just say, I like the idea of the community choice aggregator as a consumer, but when you start talking about infrastructure and land use, that we haven't really had that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to share information on the proposal that's on the table. And it is very exciting. A consumer choice aggregator is exciting. It can be so positive for California, for our community. But as a previous speaker said, the devil is in the details. And as another speaker before you has mentioned, the geozones, the county is, and the two municipalities are being asked to commit blindly to an idea, and we don't know what the impacts are going to be. And this is disturbing because we don't know what the footprint will be. We don't know what the technology will be. We don't know if it's going to alter what we love about Lake County the most, the open spaces and nature. We are told that Lake County, you will control the permitting, but the designs will be coming from Sonoma Clean Power. Once we commit, aren't we stuck going down that road? And some design, we can't reject design after design after design, we have committed at some point to go down the geozone path. So that's my concern. Once we accept the offer, we are committed to some sort of geozone project. And it might be a monstrosity, a huge plant, or maybe it's, 20 little grasshopper plants. We don't know yet. So that's my concern. And perhaps we do need to slow down and talk about, let's return to a two-step process. Are we going to join Sonoma Clean Power as a energy consumer, or are we going to go in as a partner? But it is a land use question, and it deserves a lot more serious thought. So I urge you, please consider what's on the table. Thank you.
Anyone else in the chambers?
I just have a couple of questions, and I ask you to perhaps encourage a response. Well, the first question is what is the opt-out rate in Sonoma and Mendocino County? And if we can kind of decipher for residential and commercial users, the reasoning for that opt-out, like what are we looking at for reasons why people don't want to participate as individual consumers? Thank you.
Oh yeah, your name for the record.
Nobody else did, just for the record.
I think it's because I knew them. It's my fault. I'll say it for you.
You don't know me.
Or did you want to answer those? Go ahead.
So right now, our opt-out percentage between Mendocino and Sonoma County is about 87%, or our participation rate, I should say, is 87%. Our opt-out rate in Mendocino is 20%, so we serve 80% of the customers there, and in Sonoma County, it is 89% participation rate. And those have held steady since we basically opened our doors.
Go ahead, Jeff.
May I respond to a few more?
Yes,
So a few of the things I think are important to respond to is that PG&E's revenues for all of their distribution system work and even maintaining their existing power plants is a certainty. Through regulation, our customers have to make sure they pay their full freight on all of those costs, even when they've departed on generation and we're doing the new generation. And so the history across California and across all of PG&E's territory with all of their CCAs is that there's been no change in their construction work, in their fire response, in their undergrounding, in their service calls. And you can call all the other CCAs and ask, and they will tell you the same thing. So that's a good response. I was a little confused about the comments about the GeoZone Partner NDA, but one opportunity I can just share is with the map, with the contracts that we have with partners today. One thing I want to encourage is the map that we showed at a few community meetings was highly conceptual. It's really only showing where there's hot rock. It's not showing where we're going to do geothermal. And whatever ultimate map we land on would be community driven. And so this would be something that would be worked on in Lake County for that, as well as technology choices and starting potentially as early as January, February next year, new partners, because some of the partners that we had have shaken out. They've decided to go do work in Utah instead. And then I think the other thing is that if this region is at least conceptually aligned, I think Ryan said this earlier, with the idea of building new geothermal resources, and you have tons of questions and concerns, that's what the GeoZone process is for, is having the community meetings. We've had a number. We've developed some preliminary community principles in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. That process would be repeated here. What are the community principles for new geothermal development? How can we fine tune them in Lake County? And what kinds of technologies work? So I think that process is what the GeoZone is. I don't want to go away and try to develop a detailed proposal and bring it back to Lake County for Lake County. That makes no sense. It has to be developed here with Lake County input. I understand there's a hunger for details, but we don't have them for a reason. We don't just go into a region and say, like, we know what's best. We need you to tell us too. And we can bring in proposals, but it needs to be incremental, it needs to be gradual, it needs to have community input along the way. So I think that's it's an important distinction for me, is we're not proposing a project in Lake County. We're proposing a process that could lead to a project in Lake County. So I hope that helps.
Is there any other public comment? We have Zoom. Okay. Go ahead and unmute and you'll have your 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Denise Rushing, and I'm just standing up in support of Lake County joining Sonoma Clean Power. In terms of going slow, boy, this has been a long process that has taken years to get to this point, and this board and the two cities have an opportunity that may not come again. So I would urge you to really strongly consider it. And if the issue is trust, which some of the speakers have spoken to, I want to point out that Sonoma Clean Power, as do many CCAs in California, have a proven track record of success now, of community success. So it's not just that they're developing projects, it's that they are focused on the needs of those in their area. Participation in SCP would allow Lake County to have a seat at the table in the governance of this agency, and it ensures local input into decisions that affect the energy future. Wouldn't it be great if we could benefit from the energy that is developed in Lake County, which has not always been the case? So the partnership would open doors for local energy projects, and I want to point out that one of the conversations we might SCP and Lake County might consider having with the tribal governments is the tribes have long been on the forefront of energy development around the state, and there may be some energy projects that they would be willing to talk about with Sonoma Clean Power. So it's a forward-thinking decision that the board and the cities have now. I believe it aligns with our shared goals of local empowerment, economic vitality, and environmental stewardship. And plus, citizens will save money. And I'm I have net solar generator here at our farm, and I'm pretty excited about Sonoma Clean Power coming in. I know that the people who have solar will benefit, basically we'll have the benefits we have now, and maybe in the future we'll have the opportunity to expand our systems. So thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other? Okay. Go ahead and unmute. State your name for the record. Give you 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Sterling Wellman, and I am here to say no to Sonoma Clean Power. Due to the fact that Lake County sits on one of the greatest untapped resources in geothermal in the world. I do agree with the public comment earlier. We need to have those geothermal maps. We got Sonoma County Clean Power coming in, trying to tap into our geothermal. Not only just to tap in, but we'll also have to buy our geothermal that is being pulled from our own ground. You can look it up. Sonoma County has a small portion of the geysers, but the main part of the geothermal that supplies Sonoma County does come from Lake County. And they are here trying to ask to tap into our natural resources and sell us our own natural resources, and then use our natural resources and give it to other counties that are surrounding us. So in the end, we are a county that is deprived of finances. If they are going to be tapping into our resources, we need to consider about what we could make for our county to better our own county and better the health of our community, to make things better for our community. We can't even get code enforcement to be able to take down red tag buildings because we don't have the funds. But we have Sonoma County Clean Power asking to tap into our resources, but then send our resources to other counties and make money off of it. It is a major red flag, and it's something that we all really need to look into. If not, we can look into tapping into our own geothermal. On top of it, Mount Canocti, the volcano, is on the very high list of being able to erupt. And when we start tapping into all this geothermal around the lake, what is that going to do for the volcano, let alone not even just the earthquakes? It could potentially make the volcano erupt. And then now our county and our residents are going to be suffering. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, with that, we will go ahead and close public comment. And if there's any final words from anyone on the board or Supervisor Pyska?
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming together tonight. I know it's not easy for all of us to get together in the same room, and thank you for all the jurisdictions coming together and for Sonoma Clean Power. Your roadshow to all the municipal advisory councils has been a really great way for our residents and our constituents to understand what this process is. It has been a long time coming. We've had many conversations over the years about how we can move a project like this forward. We've heard some interesting comments today, but I just want to repeat the geo zone is an opportunity zone. That is all it is. We are committed to looking at exploration. We're committed to looking at how we can possibly generate more power in our county for our county. All land use decisions and permitting goes through our county and our jurisdictions. We are in charge of that. And we will hear directly from our constituents and our communities on what works for us. This is all going to be about what works for us. This is about giving a choice to our constituents and our residents who don't have a choice right now. If we walk away from this, we continue down the road with fighting with PG&E. We talk to them all the time, about a lot of different issues. And the reality is these bills are crushing our small businesses. Our residents, our families are having a really hard time paying these utility bills. And all this does is give them an option. They don't have to take the option. They can keep with PG&E, then go right back. But the geozone is really important. It is an important opportunity for us to look at how we can grow, we can use more of our resources that are here. I live in Cobb. I'm probably the only one here that's affected by geothermal. And I say affected because I can see the geothermal field from my house. I've worked in the industry. My dad grew up in the industry. I know a lot about geothermal, and a lot of changes have happened over the years. The impact is minimal now in my community. But just because we have a lot of resources in our county, and if we show that overlay map, doesn't mean that we're going to be putting power plants next to every elementary school that we have in our communities. That's not how it works. But we have to be able to look at what options are here for us so that we can better take care of our community and give them that choice.
And so if there's any other comments from the board, or if there's anything you want to finish up with, Jeff, or anyone from the presentation?
Just a big thank you. I'm really grateful for all the time spent on this, and I'm hopeful. And if your region chooses not to do this, then I'll go back to the board and see what comes next. But I do see this as a tremendous opportunity. And just to clarify what one of the speakers mentioned is we do not charge a profit. So we're not in this for the money. And so I want to make sure that's really clear. We're a government agency and don't have a profit. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Grandis. So it occurs to me that when the City Council had the benefit of a presentation, I believe Pro Tem Disney noted it was in July, there was information presented. It was the feasibility study. Some of the information in there is, it's much more granular. It might be information that folks that are wanting to know more about. There might be information in there that answers some questions. And so I would like to encourage anybody listening to this that might have those questions to go back to those packets and get those public documents. Perhaps I'm speaking out. I will ask if our city can find a way to tag that and make that readily available so people can find it easily. But it is something already prepared that got quite detailed in a number of the aspects of, it might not answer every question, but there's some really great information in there.
Yeah, I just back up what Mayor Costa just said. Certainly, we did get a lot of great information from you and the presentation you made in Clearlake. And we can make that available, I think. Looking back at our city manager, he says yes. And I know your own website's got a lot of information. I would certainly encourage people to tap into it as well. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you again, and for making those trips to the town halls and whatnot. We do appreciate that. We appreciate any time we can engage with our community aside from here. So, again, have a great one. Go ahead.
Sorry, one last thought is I would be happy to commit now to meeting with tribes throughout 2026 and providing them with the respect for their governance by letting them know they can make the decision about whether to proactively opt out and leave or stay. And I'd be happy to commit to doing that tonight. Like that to me is an easy thing for me to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. With that, on that good note, I guess we'll go ahead and close this meeting here. And thank you everybody for tuning in and coming in. It's an evening meeting. We don't have those very often, but it shows that you sincerely care about your community and this county. So have a good night, and will adjourn this meeting.